History 101, Lecture 15, Second Great Awakening. New churches of the Second Great Awakening. We're going to talk about the Cumberland Presbyterian Church first. All right? So new churches, Cumberland Presbyterian Church. The Cumberland Presbyterian Church is an example of the Second Great Awakening. Number one, the rural frontier nature of the Second Great Awakening. Also, these new theological ideas. And also this idea of freedom, this idea of demonstrating your freedom through the exercise of religion. So let me ask you a question. So you want to be a minister in the 19th century. How are you paid? How are you paid as a minister in the 19th century? Your congregation donates money. That is how you get paid. Your congregants pay money, and that's your salary. So think about it. You want to be a minister. You just graduated from Harvard, Yale, Brown, whatever. You've graduated from a college. You are now a minister. You now have to get a job. Where would you rather be hired? Where would you rather go? The rich Boston church or Appalachia, which was poor back then. It's the poorest part of America today. It's still poor back then too. Or you want to go the rural backwoods of Appalachia, Kentucky, Tennessee, with a bunch of poor farmers. Where would you rather go? Settlers, people in the Appalachian regions of America, living the poor backwoods, places like rural Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Carolinas. What is Appalachia? Today, Appalachia is a census-designated area. There are today 450 counties that are census-designated as Appalachia. Those 450 counties are among the poorest part of America, even today. And when we say poor, we mean potentially no internet, no electricity, or little electricity. Out in the middle of nowhere, difficult to find a job, not a lot of services, not a lot of money. A lot of these Appalachian regions used to be, or in the Steel Belt, the Rust Belt, where, because of decades of mismanagement by the U.S. government driving manufacturing jobs to other countries, you have a very poor part of the country. So that's the definition of Appalachia. Appalachia, today, it's a census-designated area of around 450 counties in states like Pennsylvania, Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, the Carolinas. There's counties in Alabama and Ohio even. Anyways, and so when we say Appalachia, that's what we mean. It's a part of the country along the Appalachian Mountain Range. And even back then it was the backwoods and poor part of the country, and still is today. You look at a list of the top 500 poorest counties in America, those 450 census designated counties would be in that 500. Then you'd have 50 others, but and so you have a rural, poor, backwoods region of America, right, stretching from Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, Tennessee, Carolinas. There even Georgia and Alabama, I think, have a few of those counties as well. But it's a very poor part of the country back then and today. So you think about it. Where would you rather have your job as a minister, right? The rich Boston church in the middle of the city with all the amenities and services, or out in the middle of nowhere? And so it's difficult for these rural areas, these frontier people, to get ministers to come out there, right? That's why you have those. That's why you have those That's why you have those revivalists, right, coming out there. Presbyterian churches in the Appalachian Mountain Range area decide to start their own church. They break away from the main U.S. Presbyterian organization. and form their own church, the Cumberland Presbyterian Church. Why? Because one, difficult to get ministers. So what you do is you say, well, ministers don't need to have a divinity degree to preach Jesus. Did Jesus have a divinity degree? No, he just preached himself. He just preached his gospel, which is good news in Greek, which means good news in Greek. And so we don't need a divinity degree. In other words, we don't need those ministers, those highfalutin Harvard ministers coming out here anyways. You just feel the word of God, you can just go preach his word. And that's kind of the point. A lot of these revivalists, a lot of these Second Great Awakening revivalist ministers, they didn't necessarily have divinity degrees. Their degree was a calling from Jesus. They had a emotional, spiritual experience themselves, like Charles Grandison Finney, right? I don't need to go get a divinity degree to preach Jesus, And so the Cumberland Presbyterian Church is an example of that. This idea of the frontier, kind of developing their own ministerial practices, non-judicial religious ideas. You don't need a minister's degree. It's kind of flipped on its head. The non-judicial religious idea would be you got to have a divinity degree. So it's another example of restoration, right? Those early Christians in the first century, they didn't have a divinity degree to preach Jesus. Paul didn't, have a divinity degree to preach Jesus, right? He was educated in, Judaism, but anyways, and so that's your example for the Cumberland Presbyterian Church.